Thank you for the welcome. I hope that everyone can hear me okay. We did test it, but hopefully you can hear me. It's really great to be talking to all of you today. I'm always really excited to share any information that I can and to share my ideas and give everyone as much information as possible. So hopefully you'll get a lot out of today. So let me just start by moving the slide. Oh, that's me. There we go. So this is the presentation for today. So I wanted to start with a little question because in knowledge translation, we know that it's always good to know your audience. So if you can please, perhaps in the text box, and I don't have to wait for this, but as we go, if you can just put down an A, B, C, or D. If you are a D, can you please just tell me what your role is? It's always good for me to know who's on the line, who I'm sort of addressing. So we have a few researchers. Yep, fantastic. Thank you, Charlotte and Carmel and Cara. Fantastic. A coordinator for KT. Perfect. Student. Yep, excellent. Well, hopefully there's something in this for everyone because it is quite a diverse topic and it's something that I think all of us need to kind of work on, all of these skills. So let me just, got to find the button here. Let's go. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is, networks and connections and relationships are really the keys to successful translation and ultimately to impact. And there's a lot of talk about impact. So if I do use that word, don't get scared. It's really that I talk a lot about how translation is our pathway to impact, which is quite important in a lot of contexts, particularly in the UK and Australia right now. And I'm not sure how that sits in Canada particularly. But today I'm going to run through collaborations. I'm going to talk about how we can build our network and manage those relationships for successful collaboration, because it's all well and good that we create those collaborations, but sometimes we find afterwards that they could have done better or that we could have managed them a little bit differently. I also want to talk about thinking about stakeholders' needs and motivations, because if we want to influence, we really need to know what people want and we need to understand how to speak to them in a way that will be powerful for them and also influential for us. And I'm also going to go through some ideas around pitching and presenting to non-academic audiences and how you can be memorable, because these days it's we've got to stand out above the noise of everyone else, of social media, of people on their phones. And so when we're presenting, how can we grab people's attention? Now, as it was mentioned before, please do, as we go along, please add any comments or thoughts into the text box, because it's really helpful, obviously, for me and for the organisers to really see what people are thinking and feeling about what we're talking about today, and that it's valuable to you. And also at the end, then we can cover off on any questions that you might have. I do usually say to people, I'm not TV, but it's sort of, that's a really weird thing to say today because I kind of am. So I hope you're getting a little giggle out of that. But look, you may be thinking, like, how does the ability to communicate, collaborate and influence help you with knowledge translation? And these key skills really assist in building those partnerships so that we can make sure that the research is relevant. It helps us to communicate to diverse audiences so that we know the message will get there much more broadly, and helps us to get through the door of organisations that perhaps we wouldn't be able to otherwise get through. And I've had some success in this space and I love to share this. It'll help us to better articulate our value and to be informative, interesting and dynamic. And it gives us opportunities to maybe work with the media or to have more success with philanthropy. So these skills are good for researchers across the board. So let's get into the good stuff now. So with collaboration, it's about developing and maintaining those collaborations with external stakeholders. And this is perhaps one of the most difficult tasks to undertake because it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of effort to expand and build your network and then to develop a relationship as well. And this often disrupts the research process. So I would say there's a time value trade-off of building networks and collaborations. And for research, there is a concern around the time effort. But if you build your non-academic network with relevant organisations within your research discipline area, then you're going to be ready when you need them. So I say start early for success. You never know who you might meet, and you never know what opportunities may arise. I've met the most unlikely people just through conversations in airports and on aeroplanes. I do a lot of traveling for my work, and you never know who you're going to meet and what value they might be to you. So be really open to those conversations. Now, I just want to explain, what do I mean by networks and stakeholders, just to be clear. So a network is about having connections or people that are in your network that have a relationship with you, or that you have a relationship with. And it's about the people that you know and that know you and that you can reach out to when you need to. Stakeholders are people that you will have a vested interest or perhaps a formal role in your work that you're doing, be it research or other types of work. And stakeholders are usually people that were part of your network that have become a formal part of your work. So they're still in your network, it's just that they have a more formal role. Both your network and stakeholders are of considerable value to you. So remember that, and remember, we always like to nurture those relationships. So creating the relationship is one thing, but nurturing it and managing it along the way is really important. So developing a network requires an investment of time, and we've already sort of covered off a little bit on that. And this is hard to justify until you really do start to demonstrate value, but it's definitely worth the time in the first instance. Network members can add incredible insight to your work and add really as a litmus test for those new ideas that you might have, to bounce them off to see whether or not there's relevancy and importance there. Your network's going to help you to spread the reach of and impact of your work. They will help you to raise your individual or your project or your organisational profile. So be open to building this network and to those unexpected opportunities that come from this. Be active in a range of networks to raise your profile and build your own network. I know this takes time, but if you're a researcher or you're a student at this stage, definitely think about, who do I need in my network and how can I start to build those relationships? So identifying the key people that will help to bring people together. And the other thing that's really key here is to think about those people that might be part of your team that might be really good at networking. So you might not be a good networker, but surround yourself with someone or some people who really are, and then you can leverage off their network as well, and that can be really valuable. So peer-reviewed studies have shown that being in a really open network is a strong predictor of career success. One study showed that half of the predicted difference in career success, so promotion, compensation, or industry recognition, is due specifically to the size of your network. So it is quite a valuable thing to have a good network. Just a reminder to really do ask questions in the chat box as we go along. So building your network, there's several ways to go about building on your existing network, and I'm going to talk through how we can use conferences and meetings, cold calling, and social media as the specifics. And as I go through here, it would also be good to hear of your experiences as well. So if you can suggest other ways that have worked for you in building your network, please do go ahead and write them in the question box, because it's helpful for everyone that's here. We've talked about time. It does take a lot of time, and the benefits can be slow, but often you'll find that they're quicker than you think they might be. And I'm certain that having a good network will become a really big part of your employment. As I said before, it's part of the career success, but I also think that employers in the future will be saying, how big is your network? How many partnerships and stakeholders have you worked with? Are you good at working with people? Because this is going to be very important if in our research area and for translation we want to get things to that next place. So I'm going to talk through those three areas of live networking, of social media, and of good old-fashioned cold calling. So live networking, excuse me while I take a drink. So thinking about conferences, everyone goes to conferences, I'm pretty sure. So how can you use the poster sessions at a conference to strike up conversations with people that you don't know? So don't just read the poster, make sure that you're also talking to the author. Look for other people that are alone. I'm that crazy person who looks for the person standing on their own and goes up and starts a conversation, because some people are really uncomfortable with talking to people, but usually if you approach them and start having a nice conversation, they will talk to you. So that can be a really good thing to do. So make the effort also. Don't go to a conference with people that you know and not mingle. I see often at conferences people turn up with a group of people from their own organisation, and they tend to sit in little clusters with those people. They don't tend to talk to anyone else or make an effort to mingle with a wider group of people. So think about that next time you are going to a conference. It's great to see people that you know already, but how many people can you meet and create a new relationship with? If you are looking to meet people, people love to be acknowledged. So if you know of a paper, a publication, a presentation that someone that you're talking to has done, be sure to mention that you know their work and compliment them on it, and go with a plan. If there are specific people that are presenting and you've seen it on if you've seen that people are going to be on the program and you know that you want to meet them, or you think that they're going to be important for your network, or you'd love to discuss something further with them, write an email in advance and ask if you could catch up in one of the breaks and have a chat, or at least they'll know your name. So when you go up and introduce yourself, they'll be expecting it and they can say, oh, yeah, that's right, we've been emailing, and it makes it a little bit more comfortable to do that. And swap business cards. So, when you get business cards, make sure you link with people on LinkedIn or do something else, or follow up if you can with an email. And, definitely don't just swap cards and leave it at that. Think about what's the next step with this to say, hey, great to meet you. I hope our paths cross again in the future. It might not be anything right now, but it's about really saying, that person's really in my memory now and I'm in theirs. So please, if you've used any other methods, do add them into the text box. So online social media methods. Not sure here who's on social media. There are obviously multiple channels that you can choose from. I have found LinkedIn and Twitter to be absolutely key in building my network. A great example is that LinkedIn, you can navigate around gatekeepers. Strategically, you can get around those PAs or the EAs that you need to get around, and you can get right to the people that you need, because you can look up their profile, you can tell what their role is, you can tell who they work for, and you can find out if it's someone that you need to connect to. What you're going to need to do is you need to be really careful, though, about when you connect with someone and how you connect with that person. So you need to tell the person why they should connect to you. So instead of just sending the say, for instance, on LinkedIn, when you send the connection and it has the basic, I'd like to connect to you on LinkedIn or be part of your network, you need to write something more. You need to be, my work aligns really clearly with your work, or I saw a blog that you wrote, or I love the paper that you wrote. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. And then you start to create a relationship. And I generally have a rule that if I connect with someone on LinkedIn, I then follow up a little later to say, hey, thanks for connecting with me. I'd love to talk further at some point. And you can either meet in person and have a coffee if they're local to you, or you can meet online through a Skype meeting just to say hi. This isn't to say you have to do it with everybody, but people who are of high value to your network, absolutely. And through doing this, I've created some really great networks and great connections. And I like to call them my LinkedIn dates. I try to have about 2 LinkedIn dates a week where I meet people that I'm connected to on LinkedIn but I've never met in person. And some of the most amazing things have come out of that. Even if it's not that particular person, usually they'll say, you need to speak to so-and-so. And then suddenly you have a referral to someone else who said, I'll introduce you, or, they've recommended that you speak to someone. I'd really love to hear what channels that you are on in social media, so please do put that in the chat box. And just remember, also Twitter is a really good one for meeting people. I've sent a tweet to a complete stranger, actually quite a celebrity in one case, and ended up now I'm going to do some work with this person, and everyone said, how did you get in touch with that person? And that was on Twitter. So look, there's some great examples of how you can use this, but don't just push information to people on social media. Make it a conversation. So if someone follows you on Twitter, make sure you say thanks. I could talk about social media all day. This is not about social media. If anyone wants to talk more about that, please do reach out and get in touch. Let's move on to cold calling. So you've probably heard the saying that if you don't ask, you don't get. And this is really true. So if you're out of options for building a relationship or just for meeting the right person in the right organization, then you can always try the phone. Email usually doesn't work. So you could just send an email and then follow up with a call. There's a couple of problems that you might run into, and one is getting through the gatekeeper. So you get the secretary who answers the phone and makes the decision whether or not you can talk to the person, so that can be difficult, and that's why I like social media for getting around the gatekeeper. And also being able to engage the person in conversation over the phone for long enough to obtain a follow-up meeting or further discussion. So you need to have a bit of a plan. So if you choose this method, be really clear on the purpose of your call. And remember that the purpose of your call is not to get them to collaborate. They don't know you yet. You need to build and nurture a relationship. So the purpose of the first call is only an introduction. And what follows from this is either another meeting to discuss the work that you're doing, or a follow-up email sending them more details about the work that you're doing. You need to obtain permission, really, to build this kind of relationship when you're calling someone cold. And then you need to follow up and send them your LinkedIn profile. Say, go stalk me, go find out more about me. I always say, go stalk me. People laugh about that. So this is one of the hardest options, the cold calling. So my advice is prepare, plan, and practice. And when all else fails, the worst thing that can happen is that the person says no, thank you. But you might be surprised. You might end up with a little bit of a dented ego for a couple of minutes or, a couple of hours, but really they've just said no. They haven't done anything horrible. No one else knows, so you just let it go. So think about how you can also use a referral. So as I mentioned before, if you've met someone who says you should speak to so-and-so, when you call up, you say, hey, so-and-so said I should talk to you, and suddenly there's the commonality, so a referral. So that's really powerful. And also that credibility. So you get credibility by being associated with someone that they know. So that referral piece. You get credibility by your organization that you work for, if people know that. And you also get credibility from any awards or media or paper or things. It depends who you're talking to, what will be credible to them. But just remember to think about some of those things to build your own credibility when you're talking to people. Do your homework for sure. Who is this person you're calling? Everyone has a bit of a social or a footprint online now where you can find out more about them, and really decide what's in it for them when you're talking to them. So if you're using cold calling or emailing, please just put a yes or a no into the text box. It'd be great to know who is using this method. It's not an easy one, especially if you are a little bit introverted or a little bit scared of this. Believe me, it's not the easiest thing to do. So now I want to just flip on to, no. Okay, so a lot of people aren't, but it's something that might be interesting to think about if you're having trouble getting to contact people. So managing collaborations, this is what I want to talk about now. It's a complexity within itself, and I'm sure that anyone listening who has had to manage some collaborations and some stakeholder relationships can agree with this. But every situation and partnership is going to require a tailored approach to ensure that you're meeting the partner's needs and the expectations. So when deciding on the tools and solutions to work with your partner, think about what's going to work for this particular relationship or stakeholder engagement. And the level of involvement. Talk to them about what they expect. So some partners that you have will want regular involvement, feedback, and participation, while others will say, we just want to know what you're doing, but we don't have time to be involved more heavily. So think about that. So considering when will you engage your stakeholders? Is it going to be early on in the piece? Do they need to be informed or not? And some will be later. And at what stage of the project will you need their input? It might be that you need that right up front to make sure that what you're doing is relevant, but it might be that then after you know that, they're going to come back in at the end because they're going to take it and implement it into practice. So what are the roles and responsibilities of partners? Be really upfront about this. Also consider the resources that you're going to need, and if they have these resources. I always say to people, what's the value of the relationship that you have? If you have someone who's a stakeholder on your grant or as part of your process, but they don't bring any value to that relationship, what are they doing there? Everyone needs to bring value. So it might be that they have resources that can help you in some way, whether that's equipment, staff, money, a skill set, any of those types of things that can help you. Or they might just be a really key person in the scientific world, and we see this a lot where you have someone who's really important on a grant application who the name goes there because they're obviously good at getting grants and they're well respected in their scientific field. That person's going to have amazing networks and connections. That's why they're there. So remember to leverage that, to get introductions, to use that person so that when you hold meetings, if they turn up, other people turn up, those kind of things. That's really valuable. Remember to try and formalize the partnership. So are they going to be named on your grant? Are there going to be memorandums of understanding, contracts? Talk about the publication rights, talk about IP. Consider if you're going to have a meeting. People love meetings, but I've got to say meetings are probably one of the worst way to engage stakeholders. But I do have some tips for meetings that I've come across. So if you are holding meetings, make sure it's because they want to come to the meetings for starters. And if the right people from the organisation are not coming to the meetings, maybe it's because they don't see the value in the meetings. So some of these great tips have been, when you're listing the agenda topics, list them as questions that the team will need to answer. So people know kind of what they're there for, what the questions are to answer in that meeting. Specify how members should prepare for the meeting. So what do you want them to do before they come? What are you expecting from them when they're there? And identify who's responsible for each of those topics. So, give everyone a bit of a role in the meeting. There's a lot of technology that can be used to help with relationships as well. And a lot of this is low cost, but it might require an investment of time to develop up some skills. And I'm going to touch on this again a little bit later. But remember to consider people's skill levels when you're coming up with different ways of doing things. The other thing with meetings is really think about the size and the manageable group of people in the meeting, because the bigger the meeting, the more difficult it is. Then it just becomes a presentation rather than a meeting. And make sure everyone that leaves has an action that they're required to do or something that's next for them. Give them some importance. Thank you for the questions coming in the text box. We're going to get to them at the end, so keep them coming. That's absolutely fine. So now I want to talk about tools and platforms. So how do we build that capacity for engagement? We want to create a shared skill base in your team, and we need to include, basic training activities in the project early on to improve that knowledge exchange and co-production, and also to ensure continuity of involvement. So by including the same group of individuals and critical relationships, we can develop some trust, and that'll facilitate any of our knowledge translation activities. We can use knowledge brokers, that's helpful as well. But we need to take time to identify those individuals that play a significant role in the stakeholder community and how they may be able to act as a champion for your work. So these individuals might be well known by lots of diverse groups, and they'll be able to understand different perspectives. So if you can build a strong relationship with people like this, like I said, those high, powerful researchers that you name on your grants, then hopefully they'll be able to help you build some trust with the other groups by proxy. You're going to want to work around people's commitments. So you need to keep people involved. So respecting and working around their schedules and their other commitments. Consult with those who want to work with you as soon as you meet them. So match your process to their commitments. And if it's best to have morning meetings rather than evening meetings and certain times of year, and really take into consideration what works for the stakeholder as well as for you, obviously. But if you want to keep people on board, it's really about what works for them. Try to make it as easy as possible. Power dynamics can have a significant impact on your work with your stakeholders and the public, and it's incredibly important to recognise that power dynamics play a role in the process, and you just need to plan for and manage this quite appropriately. So those people who come in who speak all the time and no one can get a word in edgeways, think about how you might manage that person so that everyone does get a voice. There are several tools available that will help you to facilitate and manage the relationships. The examples are, an advisory panel or board. We call them steering groups here in Australia. I'm not sure if you call them that as well. You might have a full day planning or strategy meeting with your partners to go through different ideas, and you might use communities of practice, online platforms. So thinking things like using Google Drive to share your files, using wikis or Basecamp or different things like that. There's a lot of different ways that you can engage and manage your partners. Key to all of this is really to ask the partner what they want. sometimes the partner doesn't know what they want. So it's don't go with a blank page. Go with a list of things that you would offer. What does that look like, and what's the time commitment for each of those, and really start to map out what the options are, rather than just we'll hold monthly meetings or we'll hold quarterly meetings. So what types of things could you do instead? Would you have a webinar or an online meeting as opposed to an in-person meeting? Would you create a place where everyone can add information to what's going on? Are you going to create a newsletter? Are you going to have a social media group? Are you going to come together for once a year for those full day sessions as opposed to every month or every other month for meetings? Think quite cleverly about what that might look like, and they might have some suggestions even of what works in their own organisation around some of those things. I just put this up just to pretty much show that there are lots of tools and platforms. So you might think about Asana, which is a project management software, which is free for teams of up to a certain size. So you could look into that. But with any of these things, remember to think about what do you need and what are people willing to use. Google Docs, I'm not sure if anyone's used this before, but the good thing about this is that anyone can go in and add information here. You can do it simultaneously as well, so you can both be working on the same document at once, and that's fine. What's great is that all of the changes that happen to a document, you can roll them back and you can get previously edited versions, and it automatically saves, so you don't have to remember to hit save, which is great. Some of the shortcomings, obviously cloud storage. Some organizations aren't keen on cloud storage yet. And you need to have a Google account to share and to use these documents. Slack is a team communication platform, so it might be that you want to use this. You can put files, images, PDFs, documents, and spreadsheets can be dropped in there and shared with anyone that you want, so it might be a good way to manage your team. And then there's Facebook groups, there's LinkedIn groups, there's Asana, as I mentioned before, project management. But whatever you think about here, remember you're going to need to think about the people that you're working with. What are their age groups? Are they tech savvy? Often, it might be great. You might say, you know what, we're going to use Slack. It's perfect for us. We're going to do it. But if you've got to spend constantly time training people to use it, and then they don't use it because they're not comfortable with that or it doesn't suit them, then it's not useful because people aren't using it. So remember to think about people's needs and what they're willing to learn and do, and how much time you're going to have to devote to that. If you're working with a really young group of people, they might be really savvy and they might have some ideas about what they want to use. But if you're working with an older group of stakeholders, it might be they're just not technology savvy or interested, so they might not use those platforms as you would want them to. So I want to talk now about how do you determine the needs of your stakeholders. Now, this kind of goes to speaking a little bit about a model that came from sales. And so if it comes off sounding a little bit like that, think about that as well. And think about how you're sold to in the real world, as we say. So when talking to your stakeholders, remember it's not just about what you want. You're going to need to speak their language, develop some trust. And you want to build the relationship, obviously. So you need to take time to learn what it is that's going to get them interested in working with you. And a good model for doing this comes from the Entrepreneur's Playbook of Sales. Consider the 4 forces to attraction, we call this. So frustrations, fears, wants, and desires. So frustrations of your consumers are those immediate negative feelings that they want to move away from. These are the things that are creating difficulties in their industry or their workplace or their role. So what's frustrating them? And they're not going to turn around and say to you, I'm really frustrated with this. You need to build a relationship, and then you can read between the lines, or they may open up over some time. Fears are the things that will happen if the frustration continues. So fears are a long-term thing. So what do they fear will happen in the future if their frustrations aren't overcome? It could be that the organisation, if they don't learn to operate better or more effectively or efficiently, they're going to lose their government funding, or people are going to lose their roles, different things like that. Wants are the mirror image and opposite of frustrations. So what are the things that will help them to overcome these frustrations? The wants are the keys to the solutions that you can provide. So as they're talking through and you're hearing the frustrations, you're also going to get an idea of what they want to overcome this. And as they're talking, also remember to think about the language that they're using. What are the words that they're using? You want to mirror these words back because that's the language that they speak. It might be that you are exactly doing these things, but you're speaking to them in a terminology that is research as opposed to their real needs, and that just doesn't align. So that's how we can sort of influence a bit more. Desires are the opposite to fears. So what are the future desires of the industry, the organisation, the person, the role that you're working with? So for this model to work, you're going to need to listen really carefully and read between the lines to understand those frustrations and wants. You may have to plan for some work, and you're going to need to be able to understand what it is that those people ultimately want from your work, and that may also be that the work that you're doing doesn't align once you start to understand what their frustrations really are. But by going through this process, you can really start to understand if you are on the right track to meet their needs and do something that's relevant for that stakeholder. So be willing to listen and change your ideas based on the experience and knowledge of others. If you talk to someone as the expert, they're not going to hear you. So instead, ask those questions, genuinely want their input and knowledge, or the partnership won't be real. Think about your idea as a draft. So when you go to someone, you've got something in mind that you want to research. It's a draft, and you're there to shape that draft into something that is of value to that stakeholder group, particularly if you're doing something that you want to have an impact and you want to be able to translate something into practical applications for the broader community. Now I'm going to talk through how you can use this model. So for real success, you're going to want to learn to articulate their wants and desires in their own language. So remember, mirroring back the words that they use. So really listening to what are the words that they use. And we use a model for this called the 4 W's and an H model. So what do they want? What is their number one priority? So finding that out. If there was one thing you could do today that would make your job, your role, your organization, what you're doing here better, what would that be? Where in their industry, job, role, business is this affecting them right now? What's the big issue? Where's it affecting them right now? Why is it important to them? This will help to get them to buy in and for you to keep them interested and involved in the long term. It must be important for them. So why is it important for them? How long has this been an issue? You need to create a bit of urgency as well. If you want to get people on board to go with you and jump on board to be a stakeholder and be part of the research with you, you need to create some urgency by saying, how long have you been coming up with a workaround for this situation, or providing a service that's not the most effective and efficient? So how long have you been doing it? And once people start to articulate, this is the way we've always done it, and you start to say, well, did you know you could do it better and you'd save some money, or it'd make your job easier, then people will suddenly start to say, yeah, why haven't we done that? And as soon as people start to question how long they've been tolerating this, that's when they say, no, we need to do something today. And when? So discussing a time frame. So finding out if this is something they want to do right now, and providing a possible solution around, doing a trial or being part of a research project to see if you can improve this. So once you've created that urgency, you can really just start to get them involved and say, let's get started on this because it's been going on for too long. So let's create a time frame around what that might look like if we all work together. I hope this is resonating with people. So buy-in is going to be a massive thing. So you need to appeal to people's wants, needs, and desires if you want to get that buy-in. And this is how you influence people to kind of work with you. So go to their hearts and minds. Get yourself a really good pitch that goes to the emotion before the rational part. And people do make decisions emotionally and they do justify rationally. And we're going to move into sort of that pitching part now. So remember, any more questions you have about this, just please put them in the text box. So I want to talk about pitching and presenting. So really thinking about how are you getting people's attention these days? We know it's hard. You go to a conference, you're presenting, everyone in the audience is on their phone, they're on Facebook, they're checking emails. You don't have to be present these days when people are presenting. You can be half present, sitting there listening up. We're all guilty of it. So you need to do something really different to keep people's attention and to get them interested in the work that you're doing, because you are competing against all the other things that person needs to do. You think about the number of people who present at a conference. How is someone going to remember you out of all those other presentations? Because you want people to remember you if you're going to influence them, if your work is going to be important and you're going to, go on and do great things. So how will you know that they heard you? How will you know that they understood you? How can you leave your audience wanting more from you? That's the key. So I want to talk quickly about start with why. And I'm not sure if any of you have heard this, but it's a TED Talk by Simon Sinek, or Sinek, spelt S-I-N-E-K, Simon, S-I-N-E-K. He did a TED Talk many years ago. If you've seen this TED Talk, just put yes in the text box. If you haven't, then you should try and follow this up and have a look. Yeah, great. Yes. Now, I use this in my teaching. Perfect. So many people have seen this and I'm really glad. So obviously it really resonates with you. So obviously, the talk is about marketing philosophy, but it really relates to communication. It relates to how do we inspire, influence, and ultimately how do we get people to believe what you believe. So if you want to inspire people through conference presentations, grant applications, the conversations that you have with stakeholders, this particular model is very relevant to how we operate in translation. I think it's incredibly powerful. So if you haven't seen it, go take a look. If you have seen it, go back and have a look again and think about how you would use this in a research context or in a translation context, because I think you will start to see some ways that you can use it. So the golden circle, the circle's not there. I wonder if that's the next slide. No, it's not. Okay, so the circle didn't come out. There is a golden circle, and I apologize for that. I'm not sure why it's not on the slide. So the golden circle, which is usually 3 concentric circles, it's kind of hard to explain when it's not there. So in the middle circle is usually a Y. Hang on, can I draw? Maybe I can draw. Oh, yeah, hang on. Let's give this a go. Oh, wow, look at this. This is pretty funny. You guys can laugh. It's not very easy to draw circles here. Okay, these are great circles, right? You're loving my drawing, I know. Oh. Can everyone see the circles? This is hilarious. Okay, so in here we have why. Then we have how. Oh, this is really hard, right? And I'm glad the words are short, so I'm just going to put these in here for you. Great, okay, thank you. So as you can see, the middle circle is why, then you have how as the next circle, and what is the last circle. So for people who haven't seen this, go and look it up for sure. Just type into Google the golden circle or look up Simon Sinek's talk. So the way that people normally communicate is they start with what they do. So when someone says to you, what do? You always say what you do. And that's the most boring thing to tell someone. I work in a lab. I do research on this. Very boring. But if you started with why you do what you do and you're very clear about that, you could say, I work to change the lives of people in this particular field. So for me, I would say, I work to ensure that when you go to hospital, you are treated with today's medicine or the best possible evidence, whatever it might be. So thinking about that, it might even be something really big, like I'm working to cure leukemia. So why do you do what you do, as opposed to I sit in a lab and I process samples every day, or I work as a communications officer? Well, no, there's a reason why you do those things. So why do you do what you do? What's your purpose and your motivation? So what do you believe is really that why piece. So what Simon Sinek says is start from the inside out rather than the outside in. Normally we're communicating from this outside in rather than the inside out. So we're starting with what we do, how we do it and why, which is really boring. And we need to start with why we're doing what we're doing. So giving someone really clear reason to believe in you. So what you believe in and being inspiring through talking about why. Then you want to talk about how do you do what you do. So what are those specific actions that you take to realize that why? And then the what. So what do you do? And what is the result of the why? So what is the proof that you are, of why you're doing what you're doing? So why is your motivation? How's the process? And what is the product? Now I need to turn off the drawing. Okay. Sorry about that. It's gone. But you got it. So now I want to talk to you about presenting and about how you can stand out. So some tips for presenting are really knowing what's the goal of what you're talking about. So if you can use the starting with why model for when you're presenting as well. So a lot of people do research presentations. They stand up and they say, we did this work on dementia, and we collected data from 50 people or whatever it might be, or you're basically reading your abstract. But what if you stood up and you said almost the last line of your presentation first? So why did you do the work that you did? Make people sit up and go, I want to know more because you're telling me you found this, but how did you find that? So think about that when you're doing it. What does the audience need or want to know? So that punchline first, that's your why. Why did you do this research? Why are you presenting today? What is it you're telling them? Make it a story. Start with the why and then lead to the how and what. So make that a story. Make sure you're avoiding any jargon. People don't want to hear the jargon side of it. So particularly if you're talking to a non-academic audience, but even at a conference, I think sometimes we think if we're at a conference with our peers that we have to make things sound convoluted. Like I said, people can switch off really easily these days. I think it's better to be less technical and then to start, people can ask questions about more technical stuff, but if you start off less technical to get people's attention, and then you can go to the technical detail later. And for those of you who haven't seen me before, that's me in the picture, just so you know. So what makes a great presentation? So slides and words, keep it simple. Now you would have noticed that I don't use many words on my slides for a reason. I like to keep it simple. I like to use the pictures for emotions. So think about what pictures will provide an emotion for what you're presenting about. Whatever you do, please try to avoid using a white PowerPoint slide with black writing because it's so boring and everyone has seen it before. Even if you take some pictures of your building or your lab or your work environment and make it fun for people to feel like they're getting to know you. People want it to be a bit more personal these days as well. So particularly if you're presenting to a funder, to an organisation or stakeholder, how can you use something that's much less technical to get your presentation across? Diagrams, not just another graph, or if it is a graph, well labelled. Try to use some diagrams that are interesting and informative. When you're speaking, be enthusiastic. I cannot tell you how many times I have been to a conference, and if the keynote speaker talking about their science is not excited about the fact they found some change in their data, how can I get excited about it? You know, they talk and talk and talk, and then they go, oh, and then our results, we found this. That should have been the first line. Hey, we found this, and I'm going to tell you all about how we found it. And I think that would be much more exciting. So think about that. Think about your voice tone as well, so you can have some passions, have some enthusiasm, get people to listen to you. Are you standing, talking monotone? So really thinking about that. How are you standing? Try not to hide behind a podium unless you have to. Podiums, are so limiting, and I love that people like to stand there and cling onto it for dear life. And I understand people get nervous. I have some great tips for people who get nervous, by the way. So do ask me that if you are one of those people who's a little bit nervous about speaking. Stand really strong, be strong there. Think about eye contact, look at people in the audience, and speak slowly. Take a breath every now and again. It might seem weird to you because it might seem like there's this long gap of quiet and you need to fill it. Well, you don't. It's okay because the gap feels longer to you than it does to everyone else. And what gestures can you use? Be excited about what you do. You don't have to stand there really seriously with your arms beside your legs, I always say to people, and it's a bit of my joke, I use my hands a lot. So luckily you can't see me right now. I'm still using my hands. But, use those gestures. I make a joke out of it. I say, I'm not Italian. I just wave my hands around a lot. So you make a little joke about yourself and people get a little giggle and it relaxes everybody. So, you can start to think about some of those things. So there's some tools that you can use as well, which is really clever and that do things in a really pretty way. So Prezi is one that I use. I'm not sure if anyone's heard of Prezi or uses it, but it's really, it's cool. But what you have to do is be really careful because there's a lot of zooming. You have to make sure there's a lot of talking between each movement of the Prezi. So you don't want it to just move quickly from slide to slide. So think about looking at Prezi, go look at some examples and see whether or not it's something that you would like to use. People love it when you turn up with a presentation on Prezi. Everyone comes up and says, what was that you were using? Oh, Prezi. Oh, that's great. Oh. And I've been to science communication conferences where everyone's using PowerPoint and mostly they're using white slides with black writing. So then you turn up with a Prezi and everyone goes, wow, that was really exciting. You put some effort into that and suddenly you're memorable because you did something different. So that's what I mean about being memorable. How will people remember you? Do something that is a little bit different. Don't make people seasick. Some people say to me, I get motion sickness with Prezi, so think about that. The other one I love is Zeetings. I don't know if anyone's heard of Zeetings, so if you have, put yes in the box. Zeetings is a great one. You can do live Q&A, and I can talk more to that. HeiQDeck is an online platform that lets you use pictures and words and different things to make pretty slides, so that's another one. If you want to get some pictures to use with your slides, most of the pictures that I use come from pexels.com and they're all free. And this slide design that I've got here, I designed it in a program called canva.com, which is an online free graphic design program that was actually presented by an Australian entrepreneur. So I'm very proud of that. So do use Canva. All of my slides here today, I used Canva to create them because I think it's a great way to create something that's a little bit different and a bit prettier. So we're down to it. I think it was about 50 minutes. I'm sorry we kind of went a bit longer, but look, I'm really more than happy to answer any questions now. I don't know if someone wants to facilitate that process. Yeah. So the first one I saw was about being introverted and any advice for being introverted for networking. So someone suggested maybe a friend could go with you to approach someone, and that's okay, except for that might mean that you don't actually approach anyone because you just talk to your friend because you're too scared to approach. Look, I used to be completely introverted, scared to death of talking to anyone, and it's something that you just have to practice. You have to just become really comfortable being uncomfortable. Start doing it at a place where it's kind of safe. In Australia, I'm not sure if you have them in Canada. In Australia, we have a site called meetup.com. It might be an international site actually, where you can go to different groups. They have science ones, they have wine appreciation, cheese appreciation, people who like to travel, you name it, lots of different groups. And that might be a safe place to practice your networking skills on a topic that you're really comfortable with, in a more friendly environment. So I would say try to find a social networking group where you could do that to meet people, because that way you'll get to practice. You'll become hopefully confident enough that you're happy to talk to anyone. you kind of have to grow a little bit of a thick skin, which is hard to do, but you have to just say, you know what, there are going to be people who want to talk to me and people who don't. And if you try to strike up a conversation and the person's really cold, then you just say, okay, thank you, and you walk away. And you realize that it's not your problem, it's their problem. So that's a really key one. So thinking about just finding a safe place to practice for sure. That's my best advice there. I hope that helps. Yeah, so that would be things like are you going to run webinars? Are you going to do group sessions? Again, going back and asking those stakeholders, what are their ideas? How would they like to catch up, meet up, be informed? There might be some really interesting ways of doing this. Are you going to create a wiki where everyone can share information? How do you know people went and read it and did that sort of stuff? That's a whole other part of managing. Some groups, I know I've worked in Aboriginal groups and they really like the one-on-one phone call stuff. And so it's a lot of work. So I would think about asking them what they would like, asking them how often they would like, and if it's once a year, then how can you have a day that brings everyone together and really facilitate that day so everyone gets the most out of it as well. Does that answer your question, Lisa? I think it was. Okay, great. Absolutely. Now, I always say to people, and they can't believe it, I was the most nervous person presenting. I was back in the day when they had overhead projectors, and you used to have to put the little plastic slide up on the overhead projector, and I was shaking so much I couldn't even hold the little piece of plastic and put it onto the thing without everyone seeing me shaking, 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 and I couldn't get it on there square. And you touch it and it move, and so bad. I ended up leaving the university because I couldn't dare present in front of students. I couldn't teach, and now no problem. And there's a few things that I did. One is I did a year of Toastmasters. So I went and I practiced doing public speaking at Toastmasters. And it was another great way to network and meet some people. So I would recommend that's a good thing to do if you're interested in improving that. If you want to do something else that's a little more, that's a little quicker perhaps, the other thing that I've done is I realized for me, I didn't like hearing my voice in a silent room. I was fine in meetings. I could talk to people when there was feedback straight away, so people nodding, you could see people, you knew that they were understanding what you were saying, and there was conversation. But when you were standing up in the front and presenting and it was all quiet and there was no feedback, I think I was really nervous about hearing my voice. So for me, it was my voice. I was like, oh. And I couldn't even stand in my own lounge room and practice a speech out loud because it felt really weird. So if you're in that situation, there's a couple of things you can do. And the things that I think really helped me to overcome this is I ended up doing a lot of recording of videos because I did an online course and listening to my voice back. Oh my gosh, horrible, horrible. But I became comfortable being uncomfortable hearing my voice, and that helped. The other one, and people hate this, but you've got to do it because it will help you. Videotape yourself talking. Get in your lounge room, put your phone camera on, and record yourself doing your presentation. You're not critiquing your presentation. You're becoming comfortable with this is how the world sees you. You don't like it. No one ever likes seeing themselves on camera. Never. But you just have to become comfortable. But this is how people see you, and it's okay. You might look a bit weird to yourself. You might do funny things with your hands. You might put your face in a funny way. But you know what? People see you that way, and it's just the way that you are. You can't change it. So become really comfortable with the fact that that's just how you are. I hope that helps. I would say it's really weird to go watch yourself on video, but just watch it and accept that it's who you are. And no one else really worries about this. People aren't there to watch you. People are there to hear what you have to say. Someone's shared. The slide deck is very large because of the pictures. So what I could do is I could put it on a slide share. If anyone has any questions for me, they feel free to email or to reach out on Twitter and to get in touch for sure. You're very welcome. Thank you.